"We're not paying for you." The words cut straight across the table flat, practice delivered without hesitation. My daughter-in-law didn't glance around to see how they landed. She already knew. No one spoke. My son's fork hovered, then settled back against his plate. The children didn't notice the pause. My grandson scrolled. My granddaughter leaned forward, excitement bright in her voice. "I want the lobster, and the scallops, and the crab cake. That's fine. Order whatever you like." Approval came instantly. No discussion, no limits. I kept my hands folded beneath the tablecloth. The waiter shifted eyes flicking from one face to the next, searching for footing. His attention returned to her. For the table, a small nod. Yes, just not for her. Her. Not my name, not even your mother. Just a category. An exclusion. My son inhaled. "Mom." The sound didn't reach the end of the table. We agreed. "We're not doing this anymore?" I gave a single nod. Controlled. Measured. The waiter hesitated again, then turned toward me, voice careful now. "Ma'am, would you like to order?" Every gaze settled in my direction. Waiting. Expecting the familiar routine and explanation, a reassurance, something to smooth the moment over. Noted. One word. Nothing more. A beat passed. She finally looked at me, relief slipping into her smile. See, she understands. The menu waved again. "Can I add the steak too?" "Of course, it's a special night." The waiter tapped his tablet, expression neutral once more, and moved on. I stayed exactly where I was. I didn't reach for the menu. I didn't list what I could afford or what I had already paid for over the years. I didn't remind anyone that no one had asked me for money tonight. The order continued around me as if I were no longer part of it. And somewhere beneath the practiced calm, something long-trained finally stopped bracing itself, quiet, decisive, finished. The waiter lingered beside my chair longer than necessary. His tablet was still open, his posture polite but uncertain, like he was waiting for someone to correct a mistake. "Ma'am, I can come back," he offered quietly, already preparing an exit that would save us all. "That won't be necessary," I replied. My daughter-in-law glanced at me again this time, with something sharper behind her eyes. "She's fine," she added quickly. "She always is." I smiled. Not the tight kind. Not the kind that asks for forgiveness. Just enough to close the moment. The waiter nodded and stepped away. Across the table, my son finally looked up. His expression carried relief, the same relief I'd seen 1,000 times when I absorbed a problem before it reached him. "Thanks, Mom," he murmured, as if I'd done him a favor. I didn't answer. My granddaughter leaned over her menu. "Do you think they'll let me swap the scallops for extra shrimp?" "They will," her mother assured her. "They always do." The conversation moved on without me sliding neatly into plans and preferences, as though a small adjustment had been made and order restored. I watched my daughter-in-law relax into her chair. The tension in her shoulders eased. In her mind, this had gone exactly as expected. A boundary declared. Compliance achieved. She leaned toward me, then lowering her voice just enough to sound considerate. "You know we love having you here. It's just, things change." I held her gaze. "They do." That earned a blink. Not offense, just surprise. My son cleared his throat again. "Mom, you're quiet." "I'm listening." Another smile crossed her face, quick and satisfied. "See, she gets it." The word gets settled between us, heavy with assumption. That I understood my place, that I accepted the revision without complaint. The waiter returned to set down bread plates. He placed one in front of me automatically, then paused as if reconsidering. I met his eyes and gave a small nod. He left it there. No one noticed. The table resumed its rhythm. Orders finalized. Laughter returned thinner but functional. The evening moved forward on the belief that nothing fundamental had shifted. They mistook stillness for surrender. Inside, the smile held. Not to reassure them, but to keep something intact long enough to be used. I did not become useful by accident. I was trained into it. Marlene will handle it. My son had said years ago, the first time a bill arrived that made him uncomfortable. He didn't ask, he assumed. I paid it before the envelope cooled on the counter. At the time, my daughter-in-law had smiled at me with something close to gratitude. "You're so organized," she'd said. "I don't know how you keep track of everything." "I write it down," I told her. That became a pattern. A prescription ran short. A deductible came due. A school activity needed covering until the next paycheck. Each time the request arrived, already softened by familiarity. Each time my answer arrived before the question finished forming. My son never framed it as need. "It's just temporary." My daughter-in-law preferred reassurance. "You're better off than we are." I corrected her once. "I live carefully." She laughed, waving it off. Same thing. Over time, my help stopped being described as help. It became a line item no one discussed. When I paid the storage unit fee, the receipt disappeared into a drawer. When I covered the insurance gap, the policy stayed in their name. When I offered to handle a few recurring expenses, the phrase "until things settle" quietly vanished. "You don't mind," she said once, not asking. "I've got it," I replied, because that was the role. At family gatherings, the jokes shifted. "Mom's got it covered." "Mom's the safety net," said with affection, repeated often enough to sound permanent. When I mentioned cutting back after retirement, my son frowned. "But you're fine, right?" My daughter-in-law had nodded, confident. "You don't really need much." Somewhere between the payments and the praised generosity hardened into expectation. Not because I had nothing else to offer, but because I had never asked to be seen as anything more. Control crept in quietly. Not through arguments, but through spreadsheets and side comments that never sounded sharp enough to challenge. "I'll handle the accounts," my daughter-in-law announced one winter, already typing on her phone. "It's cleaner if one person oversees everything." I didn't object. I rarely did. Soon after, the language changed. Not in tone, just in framing. "We need to be mindful," she said while scrolling through expenses. "Fixed incomes don't stretch the way they used to." I nodded, though she hadn't asked about mine. At another gathering, she laughed lightly and gestured toward me. "Marlene's simple. She doesn't need much." Simple, like a category, like a ceiling. When I mentioned downsizing my storage unit, she waved a hand. "There's no rush. You've always been good about helping out." Helping out had become a description of me, not something I did. My son echoed her confidence without realizing it. "You're the most stable one," he told me once, meaning it as praise. "We'd be lost without you." She heard something else in that sentence. Permission. Over time, decisions were made before I arrived. Plans were announced rather than discussed. When bills were split, my portion was assumed and theirs debated. When money came up, she spoke with authority, as if proximity to my accounts had granted her ownership of my circumstances. "You don't have to worry," she told me more than once. "We've got you." The phrase settled wrong, but I let it sit. What she saw was a retired woman who never complained, who paid quietly, who smiled through adjustments. What she didn't see were the records I kept, the margins. I protected the discipline that had built what I lived on. By the time she spoke at the table that night, she believed the shape of our roles was permanent. She believed my calm meant dependence. She believed familiarity had turned into entitlement. And she believed she was stating a fact, not testing a boundary that had already moved. The waiter returned without ceremony, tablet held close to his chest. He paused beside my daughter-in-law first, waiting for direction. "Whenever you're ready," he said. I spoke before she could. "Separate checks." The word landed softly, almost polite. He looked at me, then back at the table. "For clarity," he said carefully. "For me," I continued, "and anything I ordered. Everything else together." My son's head snapped up. "Mom!" I raised a hand. Not sharply, just enough. The waiter nodded, once grateful for something clear, and tapped his screen. He placed the tablet down not in front of me, but beside my son. The shift was small. Everyone felt it. My daughter-in-law's smile stalled half-formed. There must be a mistake. There isn't, the waiter replied evenly. She leaned toward him, voice lowered. We always handle it together. He glanced at the tablet again. This reflects the request. My son stared at the total as if it might change if he waited long enough. This is a lot. My granddaughter whispered. Did we order too much? No, her mother said quickly. Too quickly. It's fine. But her hand tightened around her napkin. Her eyes flicked toward me, then away. The waiter remained still. I can split items further if needed. That won't be necessary, I said. My son swallowed. Mom, you didn't have to. I did, I replied. No explanation followed. None was offered. The waiter collected the tablet and stepped back, giving them space they hadn't expected to need. The children fell quiet, sensing the change without understanding it. My daughter-in-law straightened in her chair, smoothing the front of her blouse. Well, she said, forcing a light tone, I suppose things add up. They do, I agreed. Silence stretched heavier now. Not awkward exposed. I reached for my coat and stood. I'll be leaving, I added, voice steady. My son looked between us, uncertain which role he was meant to play. No one stopped me. Behind me, the sound of the receipt printing filled the gap where my patience used to be. I stood without asking permission. My chair made a small sound against the floor. It was enough to pull every gaze back to me. Mom, my son started rising halfway. I'm heading out, I said, already reaching for my coat. My daughter-in-law smiled too quickly. We haven't even finished. I have, I replied. The waiter appeared at my side as if summoned by tone, alone. I'll take care of this, he offered, nodding toward the table. Thank you, I said. I'm all set. My granddaughter looked up, confusion creasing her forehead. Grandma? I squeezed her shoulder once. Eat your dinner. That was all I gave them. No lecture. No warning. No apology for disrupting a tradition that had learned to feed on my compliance. I walked past my son without waiting for him to decide which side of the moment he belonged to. He stayed seated. That told me enough. The door opened. Cooler air met my face. I stepped through without slowing. Behind me, voices lowered. Chairs shifted. Someone called my name once softer than before. I kept moving. The street outside was quiet. I took a breath and felt how steady it came. No shaking. No regret. Just a clean line between before and after. I didn't turn around. Inside that room, they were likely explaining my departure to one another, smoothing it over, assigning reasons that didn't require them to look too closely. I had played that part long enough to know the script. This time, I didn't stay to hear it. I walked until the noise faded completely. My phone vibrated once in my pocket. I let it ring. The calm followed me, uninvited but welcome, settling into place like something that had been waiting for permission to arrive. By the time I reached my car, the decision had already moved from thought to action. What I had stopped paying for tonight was only the beginning. The next morning began without ceremony. My phone rested on the kitchen table while I made coffee. No messages yet. No missed calls I hadn't already expected. I opened the insurance portal first. The supplemental policy had been in my name for years. I scrolled past the confirmation screen once, then again, reading every line. Coverage ending at the close of the month. A simple checkbox. A final tap. The app confirmed the change. I set the phone down, took a sip, and opened the next account. The storage unit had started as a favor. Temporary, they'd said. I remembered the first month I paid it the way my daughter-in-law had waved off my concern. It's easier if you just handle it, she'd told me. You're good with details. I canceled the automatic draft and scheduled the unit for closure. Another confirmation. The vacation condo fees came next. They had framed that one as generosity toward me. It gives you somewhere to go, she'd said, smiling. The deed was in my name. The payments always had been. I ended them with the same calm precision. By the time my coffee cooled, 4 accounts were closed. Each one required a password. Each one reminded me that I had set these systems up myself years ago when no one else wanted the responsibility. My phone vibrated at last. A text from my son. "Did you get home okay?" I didn't answer. Another buzz. This one from her. "Morning, Marlene. Let me know when you're free. We should talk." I let the screen go dark. There was nothing impulsive about any of it. No anger pushing my hands. No satisfaction either. Just a sequence of decisions I should have made sooner, now taken without hesitation. Every account I closed had been justified once by necessity, then by habit. Removing them felt less like punishment and more like restoring order. By mid-morning, the confirmations were archived. The folders were neat. The silence remained intact. They would notice soon enough. Not all at once. Not dramatically. One missing payment at a time. Exactly the way dependence had been built. The first call came before noon. My son's name lit up the screen. I let it ring once longer than usual, then answered. "Mom," he began, voice uneven. "There's an issue with the insurance." I ended the supplemental policy, I said. The account was mine. A pause. Papers rustled. "We were counting on that." "I'm aware." He exhaled. "You could have told us." "I did," I replied. "At dinner." Silence followed, heavier this time. "That's not what I meant." "I know." The line went quiet. When he spoke again, the edge had dulled. "We'll figure it out." "You will," I said, and ended the call. The second call came from her. Her tone had changed. Softer. Measured. "Marlene, hi. I just wanted to check in. You left so quickly the other night." "I left when I was finished," I said. "Well," she continued carefully, "we noticed a few payments didn't go through this morning. Probably a mix-up." There wasn't one. Another pause. Longer. "You've always handled those things." "I handled them because they were mine to handle." She laughed lightly, a sound meant to smooth. "Of course, it's just..." With everything going on, it caught us off guard. "I can imagine." Her voice dipped. "You know we appreciate everything you've done." "I know what I've done," I said. "That's why I stopped." The silence on her end stretched thin. When she spoke again, the politeness strained. "We should talk about this in person." "There's nothing to review," I replied. "The accounts were in my name." I closed them. She inhaled sharply. "You didn't have to make it so sudden." "It wasn't sudden for me." The call ended shortly after. No raised voices, no accusations that could be quoted later. Just facts exchanged and expectations corrected. By evening, there were no more calls. The shift had begun to register. Not as an argument they could win, but as a change they would have to absorb. I placed the phone face down on the table and left it there, unmoved by the quiet it finally kept. They asked to meet at the kitchen table. Neutral ground, my son called it. I arrived with a thin folder tucked under my arm. No greetings lingered. No one offered coffee. My daughter-in-law folded her hands. "We just want to understand what's changed." I set the folder down between us and opened it. Nothing changed. It ended. My son frowned. Ended what I slid the first page forward. "This is the storage unit. Paid monthly for 8 years. In my name." The next page followed it. "Insurance supplement. 6 years. Automatic draft." Then another. "Vacation condo fees. 5 years. Title and payments both mine." Their eyes moved with the paper, not with me. My daughter-in-law tried a smile. "Those were choices you made." "They were," I agreed. "So were these." I turned the page again. "School activity fees. Emergency repairs. Gap months between paychecks. All recorded. All mine." My son swallowed. "We never asked you to keep receipts." "I kept them for myself," I said. "I don't forget what I carry." silence pressed in denser than before. The numbers spoke without tone or apology. Years stacked neatly, amounts totaled carefully written out in ink that hadn't faded. My daughter-in-law's voice came quieter. We didn't realize it added up like that. It always does, I replied. She looked at my son, then back at the folder as if searching for a missing page that would put her back on top. We thought, that you needed us. I closed the folder. You needed my calm, my reliability, my willingness to smooth things over. My son leaned back the chair, creaking. So what happens now? I met his eyes. Now you pay for what you choose. And I stopped paying for what I didn't. My daughter-in-law nodded slowly, the calculation finally slipping. The balance she had relied on was gone. I stood and gathered the folder. There's nothing left to discuss. No one argued. No one followed me to the door. The papers had done their work without raising a voice. The invitation came, weeks later, phrased carefully. My son left a message. If you want to get dinner sometime, just you and me, let me know. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a reservation of my own. The hostess greeted me by name and led me to a small table near the window. The menu was simple. The prices were printed clearly. Nothing assumed, nothing hidden. Can I start you with something to drink? The server asked. Water is fine, I said. When the menu returned, I ordered without scanning the room first. No one else's preferences needed managing. No expectations hovered. The server nodded. I'll put that in. I watched her leave, then rested my hands on the table and waited. The pause felt different when it belonged to me. At the next table, a couple debated an appetizer. Their voices rose and softened again. No one noticed me. I wasn't being measured against anything. When my plate arrived, the server set it down and smiled. Enjoy. I will, I said. I ate slowly, not to savor a victory, but because I could. Each bite arrived without commentary, without negotiation, without anyone keeping score. My phone buzzed once, a text from my daughter-in-law, hope you're doing well. I placed the phone face down and continued eating. Later, when the check came, it was placed directly in front of me. I picked it up, reviewed it, and paid. No ceremony followed. No one thanked me for covering more than my share. No one watched my hands. As I stood to leave, the server said, "Have a good night." "I am," I replied. Outside, the evening waited without expectation. I walked to my car and sat for a moment before starting the engine, letting the quiet settle. Respect, I had learned, was never about who reached for the bill. It belonged to the person who decided their worth could not be reduced to a line item.